She was the queen consort. She sat beside the king. She wore the crown.
And the most telling part isn't even the removal itself, it's that the decision held. It wasn't walked back, it wasn't softened with some last-minute scheduling conflict, excuse, and Charles didn't override it. That's where this whole thing gets genuinely interesting. Because we're not talking about a seating chart at a family dinner. We're talking about one of those ceremonial events where you stand, where you sit, and whether you're even on the page at all, sends a message that every single person in that world knows how to read. And
it wasn't softened with some last-minute scheduling conflict excuse. And King Charles didn't override it. That's where this whole story gets genuinely fascinating, because we are not talking about a seating chart at a family dinner. We're talking about one of the most prestigious ceremonial events
so you don't miss updates on stories like this. Now let's break down what actually happened. The palace found out about this decision through paperwork, not through some dramatic announcement. The message here wasn't subtle. Before we get into how this all unfolded, make sure to hit subscribe.
Through paperwork, not through any dramatic announcement. The updated guest list was distributed.
The updated guest list went out, and Camilla's name simply wasn't on it anymore. Not moved to a different position, not shifted to arrive separately, not adjusted to a less prominent seat,
and when Camilla received that page in her hands,
and when Camilla got that page in her hands, the reaction wasn't outrage in front of staff or some emotional outburst. It was silence. She looked at the list once, then again, scanning the formal arrangement where her place should have been.
That kind of quiet in a royal household is actually louder than any argument, because it means everyone in the room understood the weight
Princess
of what
Anne
they were witnessing
removed
before
Camilla
anyone said a single
from
word.
the Sovereign's Parade
King
guest
Charles
list
was
this
standing
week.
near a window when the reality of the situation landed. From what sources are reporting, he had the look of someone who already knew bad news had arrived before anyone had the nerve to say it out loud.
There was just nothing there. That kind of quiet in a royal household is actually louder than any argument, because it means everyone in the room understood the weight of what they were seeing.
She doesn't act on impulse. She has been inside that system for decades.
Said a word. Charles was standing near a window when the reality of the situation
so when
landed.
Her office pushed through
and
a
from what we're
revision
hearing,
that raised the
he had the look of someone who knew bad news
Charles
had
knew
arrived
this was not a
before
mistake
anyone had the
fixed
nerve
with
to
a quick
say it
phone
out
call.
loud. He understood
was
immediately
deliberate.
that this
And the
guest
way it was
list
executed,
wasn't casual
clean,
paperwork
final,
that someone in the
not marked as
planning office had
temporary,
messed
not
up.
framed as an adjustment, made it unmistakably clear that it had no intention of leaving room for negotiation.
Anne doesn't
The
make
Sovereign's
careless
Parade
amendments.
itself is one of
She
those
doesn't
events
act
that
on
carries
impulse.
far
She's
more
been
weight
inside
than
that.
a casual observer might realize. It is a formal military ceremony where royal presence signals unity, loyalty, and the authority of the crown. Every person included near the center helped
This was
shape the
deliberate,
message of who is
and
trusted
the way
in
it was
proximity
done,
to the monarchy.
clean,
So when
final,
Camilla's name
not marked as
disappeared from that
temporary,
list, it
not
wasn't
framed as an
simply a
adjustment,
personal snub.
made it clear
was a
that
public
Anne had
statement
no
about her
intention
standing,
of
and
leaving
knew
room for
exactly what she was doing when she authorized it. The senior aide who delivered the confirmation did not
system
soften
for
the words.
decades, and
This
she knows
wasn't
exactly
explained
what
away
every
as illness,
ceremonial
scheduling
decision
pressure, or a preference
communicates.
for a
So when
smaller
her
attendance
office
plan.
pushed through
The
a
amendment came
revision that
directly from
erased the
Anne,
Queen
and the aide's
Consort
lowered voice
from a major
apparently made the
military
truth feel
ceremony,
even heavier in
Charles
that
knew this wasn't a
Charles
mistake
asked
that
to
could be
approve the
fixed
final
with a quick
version,
phone.
but the question seemed to dissolve before it could reach anyone. Nobody rushed to answer, because nobody needed
The Sovereign's
to.
Parade
Anne's
itself
authority had already
is
moved
one of
through
those
the official
events
order
that
with
matters
quiet
more than a
precision.
casual
And the
observer
most
might
alarming
realize.
detail for
It's a
Camilla
formal
wasn't even the
military
removal
ceremony
itself.
where
It
royal
was the way
presence
it was written into the document. It stood as a direct correction to the guest arrangement, and its
amendment
permanence was
struck
unmistakable.
at the very
Camilla
thing he'd been
finally
trying
lowered
to
the
protect.
pace.
His
From what's
wife
being
hadn't been asked to
reported, the
accept a
silence
quieter
around her
seat.
became
She hadn't been
genuinely
asked to
unbearable.
arrive
Charles
under a
looked from
different
the document
arrangement.
to the faces
She had
near
been
him,
removed
visibly torn
entirely,
between a
and
husband who
every
wanted to
person
fight for
close
his
to
wife
the
and a
crown
monarch who
understood
recognized
what
that his
that
grip
meant.
on
This
ceremonial
wasn't only
discipline
about
wasn't
one
something you
parade.
could
This was
simply
about who has
override
the
without
right to stand
consequences.
close to the crown
That is the core
when trust
tension
has
here.
become
Charles
fragile.
has spent years
Now, to
defending
understand
Camilla's
why
place beside
Anne
him,
moved so
turning what began as
decisively,
a deeply
you have to
private
go by what
devotion to
happened
public
before that
duty,
guest list was
working
ever
steadily
revised.
to
It
normalize her
signals
role
unity,
after all the history
loyalty,
and all the
and
controversy.
the authority of the
But this
crown.
single
Every
amendment
person,
struck at the very thing
every
he'd been
palace
trying to
rupture
protect.
has a beginning.
His wife
And
hadn't
included
been
near the
asked to
center
accept a quieter
helped
seat.
shape the message
She
of
hadn't
who is
been asked
trusted
to arrive
close to
under a
not because
different
anyone
arrangement. She
shouted
had been
and didn't
removed
shout,
entirely.
but
And
because
every person
what
close
happened
to
in
the
that
crown
briefing
understood
crossed a
what that
line
meant.
that Anne
This
clearly
was not only
decided
about
could not
one
be on the
parade.
monarchy.
This was about
So when
who has the
Camilla's
right to
name
stand
disappeared
close to
from
the
that
crown when
list,
trust has
it
become
wasn't
fragile.
just a personal
To understand
snub.
why
It was a
Anne moved
public
so
statement about her
decisively, you have
standing,
to go back to
and
what
Anne knew
happened before
exactly
the
what
guest
she was
list was
doing
ever
when and she signed off on
Every
it.
palace
The
rupture
senior
has a
aide who
beginning,
delivered the
and this one
confirmation
started behind
didn't
closed
push in the
doors
words.
during a quiet
This
rehearsal
wasn't
briefing
explained
for the
away as
sovereign's
illness
parade.
or
Camilla
scheduling
reached
pressure
for
or
influence in that
some
room that
desire
she was
for a
never
smaller
meant to hold.
attendance plan.
And the people who were
Heavier
there
in that
remembered
room.
the
Charles
silence
asked to
afterwards,
approve the
not
final
because anyone
version, but
shouted,
the question
because
kind of
what
died
happened in that
before it
briefing
really
crossed a line
reamendment
that
came
clearly
directly from
decided
Anne,
could not be
and the
uncrossed.
aide's lowered voice
Charles had
apparently
entered the
made the
briefing
truth feel
expecting
even
it to be
across.
routine.
Charles had
The kind
entered
of
that
controlled
briefing
discussion where
thinking it would
details
be
are polished and
routine, the
everyone
kind of
moves on.
controlled
But the
discussion
atmosphere
where
shifted
details
when
get
Camilla
polished and
began
everyone
pushing for
moves
her role
on.
near the
But
royal
the
party
air
to be
changed
strengthened.
when Camilla
She
began
argued that her
pushing for her
position
role
beside Charles
near
should
the
be
royal
visibly
party to be
reinforced,
strengthened.
not softened
She
or
argued
hidden
that her
behind careful
position
wording.
beside
And
Charles
honestly, you
should
can
be
understand
visibly
the human impulse
reinforced,
there.
not
The Queen
softened or
consort
hid.
had
Attention
endured
here.
years
Charles
of public
has spent
judgment, years of
years
comparison, years of
defending
feeling as though she had to
Camilla's place
constantly prove she
beside
belonged
him,
in that
turning
room.
what started
Her
as a
request
private
carried the
devotion
weight
into
of someone
public
who was
duty
exhausted
to anyone.
from
Nobody
justifying
rushed
her
to
own
answer
existence.
because nobody
But
needed
the more
to,
she
working
pushed,
to
the more
normalize
Anne
her
withdrew
role
into
after all the
silence.
history
And that
and all the
restraint apparently
controversy.
created
But
more
this
tension
single,
in the room than
that's
any
to
raised
recognize
voice.
that Anne's grip on
And
ceremonial
finally set her
discipline
pen
wasn't
down,
something you could
slowly
just
and
override.
deliberately.
Husband who
Everyone
wanted to fight for his
understood
wife,
the discussion had
and the
crossed a line.
permanence of it was
She told Camilla that the
unmistakable.
parade was not a
Camilla
personal
finally
restoration
lowered the
platform.
page, and
Protocol,
from what's being
she said,
reported, the
could not be
silence
bent to
around
soothe
her
private
became
insecurity.
genuinely
That word
unbearable.
choice is doing
Charles
a great
looked from
deal.
the document to the faces
Private
near him,
insecurity is not a
visibly torn
diplomatic
between them.
phrase.
Anne's
It's
authority
direct.
had moved
It
through the
transforms
official
a ceremonial
order with
disagreement
quiet
into something
precision,
deeply
and the most
personal.
alarming
And it makes
detail
clear
for
that it
Camilla
viewed Camilla's
wasn't even the
request not as a
removal
legitimate
itself, it was the way it
conversation
was
about
written
positioning,
into the
but as an
document.
attempt to use a
It
state
stood there
ceremony
as a
to address
direct
a private
correction
wound.
to the
Charles
guest of
looked
years of
toward his
comparison,
sister, then
years
toward
of
his
feeling
wife,
like she had to
trapped
prove she
between
belonged.
loyalty and
In
duty,
that room,
knowing that both
her
women
request
believed
carried
they
the
were
weight of
defending the
someone who was
crown in
tired of
completely
justifying her
different ways.
existence.
Camilla
But
did
the
not
more she
step back.
pushed, the
She
more Anne
suggested
withdrew
that
into
his guest
silence,
arrangement felt
and that restraint
unnecessarily
apparently
severe.
made the room
And
more
that was a
tense than
trigger
any
that
raised
everyone
voice
in the
could have
room would
achieved.
later remember.
And behind
And
careful
closed the
wording.
folder
And honestly, you
immediately.
can understand
No
the human
dramatic
impulse
speech
there. The
followed.
Queen consort
No
had
compromise
endured
was offered.
years of
The
public
briefing
judgment.
ended with the kind
No
of calm
dramatic
that feels
speech
more
followed.
final than anger
No
ever
compromise
could.
was offered.
Charles
The briefing
understood in that
ended
moment that his
with the
sister
kind
had
of
already
calm
made a decision
that feels
within
more
herself
final
before
than
anyone
anger
else had the
ever
courage
could.
to name
Charles
it.
understood
She
then
carried
that
that
his
folder out
sister
under her
had
arm,
made a
and the room
decision
remained
inside
heavy
her.
behind
Charles
her.
looked toward his
Days
sister,
later, that
then
same
toward his
folder
wife,
returned,
trapped
with one
between
name
loyalty
missing and no
and
apology
duty,
attached.
knowing both women
Once that
believed they were
rehearsal
defending
room
the
door
crown in
closed,
completely
the
different
confrontation was only
Camilla
waiting
didn't
for the
step
right
back.
hallway.
She
And it
suggested
came,
that
not in a
Anne's guest
throne room,
arrangement
not
felt
before
unnecessarily
cameras, not
severe.
beneath chandeliers
And that was a
arranged
trigger
for grand
everyone
state
would
drama.
later remember.
It came in a corridor
Anne closed the
where
folder
footsteps carried
immediately.
faster than secrets
That
and
word
faces
choice is
betrayed
doing a
what
lot of
titles
work
tried to
here.
conceal.
Private insecurity
Camilla
isn't
wanted
a
an
diplomatic
explanation,
phrase. It's
and had
direct.
already
It
given
turns
one.
a ceremonial
Charles stood between them,
disagreement.
realizing
Anne
too late
finally
that
set her
silence
pen
can no
down
longer protect
slowly
anyone.
and deliberately,
Camilla
and everyone
approached, and
understood
with the
that the
amended
discussion
list
had
still in
crossed the
her
line.
hand.
Discussion about
From the accounts being
positioning, but as an
reported,
attempt
that
to
piece
use a
of
state
paper seemed
ceremony
heavier than any
to address
royal
a
jewel
point. Makes
she had ever
clear
worn.
that
The
Anne
removal
viewed
had
Camilla's
already wounded
request
her
not
pride,
as a
but
legitimate,
now it
something
demanded a
deeply
voice.
personal.
She
personal
asked whether
wound.
humiliation had become
She told
official
Camilla
policy,
that the parade
and
was
those
not a
words cut
personal
through the corridor
restoration
with the
platform.
force of someone who
Protocol,
had spent far too long swallowing
she said,
judgment.
could
This
not
was
be
not
bent
simply
to
about
soothe
missing one
private
ceremony.
insecurity. Once that
The
rehearsal room
sovereign's
door
parade is one of
closed,
those royal
the
moments
confrontation
where
was
attendance
only
carries
waiting for the
meaning
right
well
hallway.
beyond
And it
presence.
came not in a
It tells
throne
the
room, not
household,
before
the
cameras,
military,
not
and
beneath
the watching
chandeliers
public who
arranged for
remains
state
trusted
drama.
close to the
It came in a corridor
So
where
being
footsteps
removed
carried
was not an
faster than
inconvenience.
secrets, and
It
faces
was a
betrayed
verdict.
what titles
Charles
tried to
stepped in
hide.
before the
Camilla
exchange
wanted an
could harden
explanation.
beyond repair.
Anne had already
He followed
given
Camilla
one.
because he knew
Charles
the
stood
damage could
between
spread
them,
quickly if staff
realizing
heard
too
anger
late
moving
that
through
silence
private
could no
walls.
longer protect
The king
anyone.
wanted
Camilla
calm.
moved toward
He wanted
Anne
room
with the
to
amended
soften
list
what
still
had
in her
done,
hand,
to turn an
and from
open
the
wound into a
description, Anne
misunderstanding,
carried that
to
folder
protect his
out
wife
under her
without
arm,
appearing to challenge
and the room
his sister,
remained heavy
but
behind
gave him
her.
no easy
Days
path.
later, that
She
same
stood
folder
still,
would
her
return
voice
with
low
one
and
name missing and no
precise,
apology
and told Camilla
attached.
that public ceremony could not be used
Before
to
anyone
repair
else had the
private
courage
standing.
to name it,
Camilla
coming
did
out,
not
that paper
accept those
seemed
words
heavier
quietly.
than any royal
She
jewel
looked
she'd
from
ever
and to
worn.
Charles,
The
searching
removal
for
had already
loyalty,
wounded her
and
pride,
finding
but now it
hesitation
demanded a
instead.
voice.
The Queen
She asked whether
Consort had
humiliation
fought for
had
years to
become
be seen
official
as part of the
policy.
monarchy's future,
And those words
not
cut through
simply
the
its
corridor
difficult
with the
past.
force of someone who
And
had
now
spent
the
too
very
long
institution
swallowing
she had
judgment.
worked so
This
hard
wasn't
to
only
enter
about
seemed
missing
to
a
be closing
ceremony.
around her.
The sovereign's
And
parade
response made that
presented a
pain worse,
controlled
because it
exterior,
wasn't emotional.
but behind
It was
that calm
controlled.
surface lay a
It
clear
sounded less
internal
like
verdict.
anger and more like
Ceremonial
judgment.
trust had to be
Charles
protected,
tried again to intervene,
even when personal relationships suffered. Anne didn't need to explain herself again. She had already spoken through action, and that action became stronger because it held under pressure. The Princess Royal had proved something the palace rarely says out loud. Closeness to the crown is not guaranteed by marriage, emotion, or expectation. It must be supported by trust. That was why her move carried such force. She hadn't simply blocked Camilla from one event. She had drawn a line around the ceremony itself and forced everyone else to respect it. William's silence confirmed what Charles could no longer avoid. The prince had refused to push for reversal, and that restraint revealed the future shape of the monarchy more clearly than any public statement could. He understood that fragile compromises might soothe the present, but they could weaken the institution waiting for him. The future king chose discipline over comfort, clarity over emotional repair, and confidence over confusion. In doing so, he left Camilla wounded, but he left the crown steadier. The final emotional verdict was impossible to soften. Anne's removal of Camilla from the sovereign's parade guest list marked the moment private discomfort gave way to public order. Camilla lost a place at one ceremony, but the monarchy gained a sharper boundary around what duty demands. Charles was left wounded, Anne was left vindicated, William was left steadier, and the crown emerged colder but clearer. The parade ended not with reconciliation, but with a truth no one inside the palace could deny. In the House of Windsor, absence can speak louder than any crowd.
Ancient structure of ceremony with a confidence that makes resistance look reckless.
So being removed wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a verdict. Charles stepped in before the exchange could harden beyond repair. He followed Camilla because he knew the damage would spread quickly if staff heard anger moving through private walls. The king wanted calm. That phrase struck him because it carried more than complaint. It carried warning. Anne was saying that Camilla's presence at the parade would not strengthen unity. It would pull attention toward division, toward whispers. It is one of those royal moments where attendance carries meaning beyond mere presence. It tells the household, the military, and the watching public who remains trusted close to the crown. Answer made that pain worse because it wasn't emotional, it was controlled. It sounded less like anger and more like judgment. Charles tried again to interrupt, but Anne turned toward him with the calm force of someone who had already crossed the point of retreat. She told him the crown could not afford another appearance clouded by internal tension. Toward every unresolved fracture the palace had tried to bury under polished ceremony. And Camilla's voice changed when she asked whether Charles had agreed to it. That question was more dangerous than any accusation because it demanded a choice. Husband or king, defender or guardian of order. Charles opened his mouth, but the pause came first, and that pause became the answer net. When Anne walked away, she left Charles facing Camilla alone, and the space between them filled with everything neither could say. He had not removed her name, but he had failed to restore it. She had not lost the seat, but she had lost certainty. Here's what makes Anne's authority in this situation so no one wanted to hear. Camilla understood it instantly. Anne understood it too. The silence betrayed him from the ancient structure of ceremony with a confidence that makes resistance look reckless.
Those words carried no obvious insult on the surface.
It didn't come only from sharp words at a corridor. It came from a deeper power that Camilla seems to have underestimated. The palace had always known Anne to be firm, but this moment revealed something more dangerous than temperament. She knows the rules. She understands the machinery. She can move within and didn't press further. She didn't need to. The decision had already done its work, and the corridor had exposed what the guest list only hinted at. Wanted room to soften what Anne had done, to turn an open wound into a misunderstanding, protect his wife without appearing to challenge his sister. But Anne gave him no easy path. She stood still, her voice low and precise, and told Camilla that public ceremony could not be used to repair private standing. Camilla didn't accept those words quietly. She looked from Anne to Charles, searching for loyalty and finding hesitation. Camilla challenged the guest list and got answered with the weight of the institution itself. Charles didn't need anyone to explain why Anne's move carried such force, but he still read the file as if the pages might offer a softer truth. A senior courtier stood nearby, watching the king's expression shift from irritation to something heavier, something closer to reluctant understanding. Anne's influence hadn't appeared disappeared overnight. It came from dictation instead. The Queen Consort had fought for years to be seen as part of the monarchy's future, not just its difficult past, and now the very system she had worked to enter seemed to be closing around her. Anne's decades of service, discipline, and the kind of ceremonial experience no palace advisor could manufacture. She understands royal order because she has lived in existence before anyone dared offer it. Charles found the private note attached to the file and stopped reading for a moment before returning to the line that mattered most. The parade, Anne wrote, must proceed without personal dispute, and it guarded it and watched what happens when personal desire tries to bend it. The sovereign's parade guest list is more than attendance. It's a controlled statement of who belongs. He would expose a fracture in the very system meant to show unity. A private wound would become a public contradiction. Anne's amendment was colder than Charles expected, affecting sovereign representation. Those words carried no insult on the surface, yet they landed like a verdict. Anne wasn't accusing Camilla openly. She was doing something more powerful. She was defining the danger and placing duty above sympathy, order above comfort. Everyone understood the palace machinery had chosen stability over emotion. Once the and ceremony above one woman's need to be publicly reassured. Camilla had already felt that consequence before Charles finished the final page. She knew she had been outmaneuvered before the week. She hadn't merely erased Camilla's name and left an empty space. Reality came with brutal simplicity. For Camilla, the first sign of the new rations continued without her, and no one rushed to correct it. Camilla entered the planning room, expecting the usual rhythm of ceremony to bend back. Her palace machinery accepted Anne's decision. The fallout moved from private rooms into every relationship surrounding the crown. And fallout rarely begins with shouting. Sometimes it begins with a door that does not open, a call that is not returned, a chair quietly removed from a room where someone expected to sit behind. She had, once a royal ceremony enters final planning, changes stop feeling near the ceremonial heart of monarchy. A formal arrangement that tells the household, the military, and the public who's around her. There should have been a schedule packed waiting, a folder marked with her attendance notes, a place prepared for the Queen Consort as if the earlier tension had been only a temporary storm. Instead, the table had already moved on. The sovereign's parade preparations were now being carried out under the revised guest arrangement. And that matters because it stands inside the circle of trust and begin to feel like facts. Anne's order had not been debated into weakness. It had been accepted. The silence in the room hurt more than any open challenge. Staff had been instructed to proceed without discussing the change publicly, and that discipline created its own kind of cruelty. Nobody correct her was gone. Her place had been reassigned. The ceremony was moving forward, and she was no longer inside its machinery. Camilla asked one aide where her schedule pack had been placed, and the hesitation that followed became the answer. It was only a few seconds, but inside those seconds lived the whole truth in Camilla because there was nothing left to correct. Nobody rushed toward her because learned soon after that no one had been given permission to rescue the moment she saw the absence before anyone explained of her new position. The aide didn't insult her, the aide didn't refuse her, the aide simply paused long enough for the Queen Consort to understand final ceremonial briefing had already moved forward without Camilla's attendance notes included. That detail struck him harder than he expected. A private argument could still be softened, a public correction could still be shaped, but a finalized briefing without his and that Anne's decision had traveled farther than a private disagreement. It had reached the desks, the briefings, the timing sheets, and the people trained never to react. Charles looked at the palace had chosen a path. The king could feel the decision hardening around him, turning from family conflict into institutional reality. He had wanted time and had used procedure. William was quietly informed next, and his response carried its own warning. The prince didn't react with shock. He didn't. Charles finally asked whether Anne had gone too far, reorganized the nearby positions, tightened the order, and reshaped the arrangement so the removal looked deliberate, structured, and final. That precision unsettled him more than anger would have done. Anne's question didn't land where he hoped. William chose his words with care, knowing that one careless answer could turn family pain into a battle over the future. And in that careful pause, the king understood understood that his son was no longer looking only at Camilla's absence. He was looking at what the monarchy would become if personal wounds kept shaping public duty. That's when this stopped being only about Anne and Camilla. The ceremony even began. The Queen Consort had expected a dispute, perhaps even a private apology, but Anne demanded an explanation. He paused, measured, and controlled, as if the decision confirmed something he had already feared. Charles watched that restraint closely because silence from William is rarely empty. It usually means judgment is forming behind it. Full path that could restore Camilla without humiliating Anne or turning the weak ceremony into a royal step built the decision into the official structure itself. Charles finally set the file down without speaking. And in that silence, Charles knew this, and that knowledge made the file harder to challenge. If he reversed Anne too quickly, he wouldn't simply restore Camilla on the belief that certain decisions are steady once made. The sovereign's parade is not a family. Acted before the dispute could damage the parade itself, before whispers became open embarrassment, before the monarchy appeared to be managing feelings instead of command. Charles heard the warning beneath his son's restraint. Restoring Camilla would not heal the wound. It would expose it. William left the room without triumph, and Charles remained behind the luncheon, where wounded pride can be soothed with a quiet apology. It's a public expression of discipline, loyalty, and command. If Charles overruled Anne for emotional reasons, it came about the future of the monarchy. The decisive moment came without aids, without papers, and without anyone to soften the truth. Charles and William stood alone in a private room, father and son facing a decision neither could reduce to protocol. Anne had removed Camilla from a parade list, but William understood the deeper question, whether the monarchy would protect feelings or protect trust. Charles looked at his son with the those words struck hard because they weren't cruel, they were true. William revealed that staff confidence had already shifted toward Anne's version of events. She had acted with the silence he had feared most. He didn't call Anne, exhaustion of a man carrying two loyalties that refused to live peacefully together. He didn't ask as king first, he asked as a husband. He wanted William's honest view, but he also wanted a way back. A careful can be calmed. Precision has to be answered. And the king understood with growing discomfort that his sister had prepared for results would send a dangerous message that personal discomfort could outrank institutional trust. Charles spoke of Camilla's pain, and for a moment the room felt less like a royal chamber and more like a family trapped by history. He didn't reverse the order. He let the decision stand, and in that refusal to act, the final direction of the week became clear. By then, the palace could contain the decision, but it could no longer contain the meaning, and the outside world began to read the silence. By morning, the story had escaped the velvet walls. It was no longer a private amendment, no longer a tense exchange between royals. He said she would not see this as discipline. She would see it as rejection. William didn't dismiss that suffering. He knew the Queen Consort would feel the absence deeply, and he understood that no official wording could soften what removal means. But his answer came with a calm weight of a future king. Public duty, he told Charles, sometimes required private pain to remain private. The prince understood the danger immediately. If the removal was reversed too quickly, the crown wouldn't look compassionate, it would look divided. It would look as if ceremony could be bent by pressure after Anne had already drawn the line. William knew his aunt's authority couldn't be weakened lightly. Anne had acted within the ceremonial structure, and that mattered because royal order depends no longer a folded list on a polished table. It became an image, the country changed, or a minor adjustment. They were seeing a message. They were seeing Anne's decision stand untouched. The Queen Consort had wanted visibility beside Charles, yet now her invisibility carried more power than any appearance could have done. That was the cruel turn. Her removal had become the story. Anne received the morning papers without triumph. She didn't understand that victory inside a family can still feel like loss. Her decision had protected order, but it had also exposed pain. A major newspaper front page captured the whole rupture in one brutal frame, which we could understand immediately. Princess Anne standing in uniform beside the headline, parade line drawn, with a smaller image of Camilla from a previous ceremony beneath it. The country didn't need a long explanation. The page told them everything. Outside Buckingham Palace, A small crowd gathered by the gates, not shouting, not waving firm, Camilla absent, and the monarchy choosing order over emotional repair. Camilla learned quickly that silence can travel faster than any official statement. The sovereign's parade suddenly became the center of national attention because her name was missing from the official guest list this week. Palace with painful clarity. He could fight the story emotionally and risk making the fracture larger, or he could accept what the decision had already declared. Camilla's absence had moved beyond private injury. Anne's firmness had become public symbolism. William's statement at the sovereign's parade wasn't spoken from a podium, printed in his decision didn't merely remove a name. It defined a boundary, and everyone knows the palace had endured private pressure, emotional appeals, and public attention, yet Anne's decision still survived. The Queen Cons's officials tried to keep their words narrow. They spoke of ceremonial arrangements. Anne had gone too far. Others whispered that she had finally done what others avoided. That matters because public field restraint had become future direction, and when the noise settled, what remained was not scandal but judgment, the kind only history gives after the shouting stops. In the end, the most powerful Camilla had expected to stand. Princess Anne round the crown understood exactly what had changed. Camilla stayed away, but her